Okay. Good evening. And welcome to everyone who's joining us on the internet. We'll go right into the book. The ego analyzes. The Holy Spirit accepts. The reason the ego analyzes, in other words, the reason each of you thinks things through, is because the ego has no source to go to in order to know anything. The ego, really being non-existent, just an imagination, doesn't have a capacity to know. And so it must gather data and analyze it so that it may come to what it calls an intelligent decision. And of course, what determines an intelligent decision as far as the ego is concerned is something that successfully covers up the fact that it doesn't really exist. It's something that protects it from discovery. But the Holy Spirit accepts. The Holy Spirit has not denied its source. The Holy Spirit just a moment. Which is nothing more than your right mind, you in your actuality, has never separated itself from its source. And it knows that its function is to reflect its source. The Holy Spirit, claiming no separate actuality from its source, yields to its source. That is its nature. That is its function. That is your nature. That is your function. Shifting from the ego perspective to the only true perspective that you have available to you seems a frightening one. Because it means that you are giving up personal control, personal authority. The only thing that the ego sees can keep it intact. Keep it safe from dissolving, from disappearing. From losing its validity. And because the ego is not an it, it's just a way you're using your minds, it seems to you that you will lose your identity. You will lose your actuality. You will lose that force of presence or force of character that makes you presentable and actual, which obviously means that you will disappear. but you are not what you imagine yourselves to be. You are that which has imagined itself to be something different from what it is. You are that which has the choice to imagine or not imagine. You are that which is present, whether imagination is occurring or not. Just as you are that which exists, whether you're thinking or not. You are that pure awareness, conscious being, the being of consciousness that exists immovably, infinitely, eternally. With or without thought. And so the Holy Spirit accepts. This word accepts is important. It's not important when you are awake, but it's important when you're not awake and in a process of waking up. Because one who wants to be an author does not want to accept. One who claims authority that he does not have wants others to accept him. And so, to engage in acceptance, to consciously engage in yielding to something other than what you presently perceive yourself to be, is essential. To waking up. It is essential to abandoning your habit of trying to be and thinking that you are successfully being a personal authority, which would cause you to be separate from everything else, and which is the whole problem that all of you are wanting to wake up from. Continuing, the appreciation of wholeness comes only through acceptance. For to analyze means to separate out. The attempt to understand totality by breaking it up is clearly the characteristically contradictory approach of the ego to everything. You're not feeling well. And somebody says, well, what were you thinking? What was your attitude before you started not feeling well? You're responsible for what you are experiencing. What were you thinking? Well, what caused you to think that? Why were you thinking that? And getting all of the little details so as to have an understanding of the process by which this one arrived at a point of not feeling well. Why? So that a process of healing might be arrived at that can be used again in the future and thereby assure control so that that one won't have to go through the problem again. But the Holy Spirit would say, aside from what you were thinking, aside from what events happened, are you not the Son of God? Are you not God's daughter? aside from what you think has happened and what seems to justify your condition, are you not the manifestation, the visibility and tangibility of love, God's love, in His self-expressing right there where you are? Do you realize how loved you are? Will you open up to the experience of love that not only surrounds you, but constitutes the essence of every little aspect of you? Every molecule, every atom, every movement of energy in what you would call your body is the presence and movement of love illuminating everything. You are the energy of love. The energy of love is all there is of you. Will you take some time right now to let that experience in? You see, you don't need to defend yourself against anything. You don't need to defend yourself against your thoughts. You don't need to defend yourself at all, because you are safely held in the arms of God, because you are the embodiment of God Himself and nothing else. You see, the Holy Spirit accepts what's true of you and reflects what's true of you back to you so that you might consider what's true of you without analysis, so that you might be able to quiet your fear enough to let the experience of love that is you and is around you in. It invites you into a wholeness, not into bits and pieces and parts. It moves your mind into a singularity which is perfectly in harmony with God. It invites you to accept rather than analyze your best beliefs about yourself. Continuing, never forget that the ego believes that power, understanding, and truth lie in separation. And to establish this belief, it must attack. Why must it believe that power, understanding, and truth lie in separation? Because it's a state of mind in which it sees itself as independent and needs to confirm its independence in order to ensure its so-called existence and demonstrate it to be real. And in order to establish this belief, it must attack. Well, what does that mean? It means that it must attack your capacity to remember what you truly are. It must cause you to become distracted from the truth, the real truth, that this so-called ego, this body of thoughts that you employ and concepts and mutual agreements, that they are... I'm sorry, I lost it. It must demonstrate that they are truth because they are essential to its continuing its sense of existence. Unaware that the belief cannot be established, and obsessed with the conviction that separation is salvation, the ego attacks everything it perceives by breaking it up into small and disconnected parts without meaningful relationships. And thus without meaning. When you look at somebody who's distressing you, you never look at them in their totality. You look specifically at their bad habits, at their bad characteristics. You ignore the kindnesses that were expressed yesterday or even this morning. You ignore more than anything the fact that because they exist, they are the effect of their Creator and therefore are holy. You pick them apart into little disconnected pieces, and then you confront them with this sort of patchwork quilt of a characteristic, of a caricature of them. And you try to prove to them that they are what you are seeing, and that they should be ashamed of it, and that they should feel guilty for it, and that they owe you something for the distress it has caused you. Always, the correction of a problem with another involves first starting with the ultimate truth about them. For example, this is God's beloved son or daughter in whom He is well pleased. This one is not who I conceive themselves to be at the moment while I'm in my emotional twit. If this one exists at all, good or bad, he or she exists because God is being them right there. And so I choose to approach them and consider them in my mind on the basis of that ultimate fact. And I will do that in order to get through and past the bits and pieces, the bad bits and pieces of them that I have collected together to characterize them in my mind. So that I might confirm to them the truth about them, rather than the misperception I have created of them by tearing them into bits and pieces. The ego will always substitute chaos for meaning. For if separation is salvation, in other words, if independence is so goddamn great, then harmony, togetherness, yielding, acceptance is threat. to be the self-made man. And recently, to be the self-made woman. That is the big goal. But not one of you means anything all by yourself. Because not any one of you exists all by yourself. And you certainly can't exist at the expense of everyone else. And waking up is learning how you fit in with everything else, and how everything else fits in with you, and how essential you are to them, and how essential they are to you. But this is threatening to the ethic of being a self-made authorizer, a self-made person. We've discussed it before. Love is the answer. And love is embrace. Love is inclusion. Love is the willingness to acknowledge the best in each other instead of confirming the worst. Waking up, therefore, means actually changing your behavior. Your mental behavior first, and then your external behavior to be consistent with it. The ego's interpretation of the laws of perception are and would have to be the exact opposite of the Holy Spirit's. The ego focuses on error and overlooks truth, which means, since it's the opposite of the Holy Spirit's, that the Holy Spirit focuses on truth and overlooks error. But the arrogance of the ego insists upon looking at a brother and pointing out their errors so that it might get a leg up on the situation and stand taller and gain some importance by virtue of having leverage and thereby control over the one who's been put in second place. The opposite of inclusion and the establishment of estrangement, separation. It, the ego, makes real every mistake it perceives, and with characteristically circular reasoning concludes that because of the mistake, consistent truth must be meaningless. The next step, then, is obvious. If consistent truth is meaningless, inconsistency must be true. If truth, in its definition, has meaning. Well, the statement is quite popular. Well, everyone creates his own reality. So, truth is only consistent with the current definition of reality that anyone is using. And of course, what is true will depend upon how much self-protection is needed at any given moment. Because if one is vulnerable, then what the other person doesn't know won't hurt him. And so one will refrain from being honest with his neighbor or his friend or his spouse and so on. And so truth is inconsistent, and it becomes that which serves the safety of one who consciously chooses to be in the world deceitfully. And if that can be practiced well and apparently successfully, it proves that inconsistency is a truth and is to be valued. It is an essential of life. Now, some practice this to the extreme, and others practice it more subtly. Most all of you practice it subtly. But you know what? As long as you have agendas of your own that you're engaged in accomplishing without ever having asked the Father or the Holy Spirit whether this identifies fulfillment for you, you are creating your own reality, living in your own concepts of what is real, and thereby living in a made-up world and sense of self that causes you not to be honest with each other, with your fellow man. And you think you're doing this for your survival, which justifies it. Whether you are consciously aware of the subtleties of your valuing truth as that which is inconsistent, you can begin to move out of it by choosing to listen, by choosing to refer to the Holy Spirit or God and ask, is this appropriate for me? Is this that I am thinking about doing in harmony with my true fulfillment? And if it isn't, what is? Well, I know some of you say, been there, done that. I didn't get any answers. Doesn't work for me. Maybe it worked for you. But didn't work for me. End of story. I will tell you something. It will work for you if you will persist. If you will let your intent be singular. If you will do it not as a test of God, but as an opportunity for once to be consistent yourself in a continuing manner.